We all know these new GLP-1 medications like Ozempic can be really helpful for weight loss. What if it could also help out with people that are dealing with severe mental health issues like depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, and other psychological disorders? Well, watch this video here and I'm going to do a breakdown of a really cool new research article that talks just about that. So stay tuned. What's going on, everyone? Coach D here, coming to y'all as always from beautiful Boca Raton, South Florida. Hope you're having a wonderful day. Today we're gonna be talking about, of course, GLP-1 medications are a hot topic right now. And as someone who works a lot with weight loss clients, this is always something relevant that I like to touch on. But we're not just talking about GLP-1s in weight loss in general. We're actually going to be talking about some new research that's been coming out in the last couple of years that's kind of been culminated together. And that's touching on how GLP-1 medication interacts with people who are dealing with some severe mental health issues, specifically those that are taking medications for things like anxiety, depression, bipolar disorder, and even schizophrenia. Because whenever we talk about GLP-1, there's always the concern of side effects. And I'll link my video before I've talked about the general overview of GLP-1 drugs. And what we know is that they are very safe and effective for people who are trying to lose weight in general and actually work very, very well. But what about when we look at certain populations of people and maybe some other medication they're taking? Is there any other cause for concern? Are there any side effects that are now added on because people are taking things like psychotropic medication for mental health disorders like we mentioned before? Well, there's a brand new systematic review that came out that I want to review and talk about with y'all, break down exactly what it means and kind of the benefits that you can have if you're dealing with any of these disorders and taking a GLP-1 medication like an Ozempic, and how that can help you out in the long run for your overall health. And of course, if you enjoyed this video, y'all know what to do. Please subscribe to the channel, like, comment, and share. Really helps me out here. So let's go ahead and jump into the content for today. So we got this brand new 2025 systematic review that just came out, and it's titled Glucagon-like Peptide 1 Receptor Agonist in People with Psychiatric Disorders. That's a fancy way of saying GLP-1 drug and how it interacts with people who have mental disorders or mental health concerns and are taking medications to help combat those issues. To kind of give a little brief summary of what a systematic review is, if you're not sure, a systematic review kind of looks at a culmination of studies on a particular topic. So for example, if you had a systematic review on hypertrophy, building of muscle, it would look at a particular question about building muscle, say building up your biceps or building hypertrophy when you're in a calorie surplus, whatever the specific topic is, and it would look for various studies or articles that look at a very similar topic and kind of pull them all together to find a common theme. So we're going to talk about this article that pulled a lot of research articles over the last couple of years, looking at people who are dealing with psychiatric disorders, most of which are taking medications for them, and how taking a GLP-1 like drug was able to help them over the long run. So of course, because most of these people in these studies are taking what are called psychotropic medications, I first want to make sure we have an understanding of what exactly we're talking about here. Psychotropic meds, to kind of put it simply, are drugs that impact your mental state, your mood, your behavior, your perceptions, in order to help you deal with certain or help combat the effects of certain psychological disorders like bipolar disorder, depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, and even some cognitive issues like Alzheimer's disease. And the main way that these medications typically work, although they have slightly different impacts on the body, is really they target the neurotransmitters of your brain. These are the chemical messengers that help impact your brain's activity for, again, modifying these behaviors, perceptions, etc., that ultimately cause a disease state that you're dealing with or that someone you know may be dealing with. There's really 5 main kind of categories of these medications, these psychotropics that we talk about here. And we're going to break them down real quick. First one is your antidepressants. You could think about these as like your SSRIs. Someone who's dealing with depression in general may take these ones to kind of help their overall mood and help regulate how they're feeling. There's also antipsychotic medication, things like clozapine. This is something that helps with severe disorders like schizophrenia and bipolar disorder to help out these individuals. You also have mood stabilizers. You may have heard or have a family member that takes lithium for this kind of issue, where they have major depressive disorders or even have severe forms of manic episodes, where they take this to kind of help them regulate their behavior and their emotional state a little bit better. You have anti-anxiety medications. Usually the classification is called benzodiazepines, or more commonly you may have heard something like a Xanax, right, to help people who are dealing with generalized anxiety or large anxiety episodes. And lastly, you have your stimulants, things for like ADHD medication, Ritalin, Vyvanse. You maybe have heard these more common, right? These are ones that a lot of times are abused sometimes when, college students are trying to study for tests or they're just trying to focus a little bit better. But again, these are another form of medication that maybe people may take and that may impact their health negatively because of the side effects. And so while most of these do have an impact towards weight gain, of course, some of them may go in the opposite direction. People who take ADHD medication may find that it's harder to gain weight and where they maybe don't feel as hungry because it is more of a stimulant-like drug. But a lot of these have an impact because, again, they work on the neurotransmitters of your brain, your dopamine, your serotonin, or even your epinephrine signals on the brain. It can actually make you feel more hungry or just kind of overall make you less active, and therefore you gain weight and have poorer metabolic health than you otherwise would without these medications. And I'm gonna preface by saying, I am very pro-medication in most cases. If you are someone who is dealing with a mental health disorder or suspect that you are, of course, talk to your doctor, man. Figure out, what's going on so you can get set up and get taken care of. But of course, anytime you take a medication, a lot of times they have side effects, and we want to make sure that we can help modify or mitigate those potentially, especially when it comes to your overall metabolic health. So again, some of these drugs, they increase your appetite, right? They work specifically on parts of the brain that maybe make you feel more hungry. They maybe dampen your reward system, right? If you are messing with your dopamine, maybe you don't feel as much enjoyment as you otherwise would. And so maybe you use food as a new reward system. Some of them actually lower your metabolism, so that ultimately makes you burn less calories and maybe makes you more sedentary overall. So now you're not as active as you would normally be. And so you got it both ways, where you want to eat more and you're moving less. So ultimately you end up or have the greater potential to develop obesity and being overweight compared to if you were not on these medications. And to kind of paint a better picture here, we also know that people who are taking these medications in general actually have higher rates of obesity. We know that on a population level, about 40% of Americans over the age of 18 are classified as having obesity. But if you look specifically at individuals who are taking antidepressants, it's roughly about 55% of them have obesity compared to the 40% with the general population. We also see with those taking antipsychotic medications that the range of obesity is anywhere from 40% upwards of 64%, depending on the medication and the length of time that they're kind of looked at as dealing with obesity. So again, these metrics are really just to highlight that while yes, obesity is still a problem for the general public, we know that if you are taking some of these psychotropic medications that you're even more likely to have obesity because of all the reasons I mentioned, where it's gonna make you feel more hungry, it's gonna make you feel more sedentary and not want to exercise as much, which makes sense, right? If you're taking something that's gonna alter your state of mind, your mood, you're much more likely to want to sit on the couch, relax, kick up, maybe use food as that reward system. And so now you got more likelihood of developing poor metabolic health. So in this review, when they kind of pulled all the studies together, they pulled a total of 24 studies from just over, I believe, 800 studies in total with about 2,300 participants. And so what we saw is that they were looking at some major psychological disorders, meaning in order to be included in this review, you had to be dealing with something like schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, depression, anxiety, any kind of mood or mental health disorder. You had to be classified as being diagnosed with one of these issues. And while not everyone in the study was taking psychotropic medication, a vast majority of them were, which again would lead to them having more adverse metabolic health issues. But again, we also see people that are dealing with these issues in general when not taking medications are still dealing with higher rates of obesity. So we got to see both ends of the spectrum here and how taking a GLP-1 like drug would impact them overall. So again, 24 studies in total were actually selected from the over 800 that were reviewed in the initial result. And again, we had just under 2,300 participants in total that were pooled, and we looked for common themes among these individuals that were dealing with psychological disorders and how by taking a GLP-1 medication, how that impacted them overall. The average duration of these reviews was about 4 months, 16 weeks. Some were a little bit shorter, some were a little bit longer. And basically what they wanted to see is if you were dealing with a psychiatric disorder, whether you were taking a medication or not, when you added this GLP-1 drug, how did that impact your overall health from a BMI, weight, blood glucose level, everything that has to do with your overall metabolism? How was it impacted? And Did it add any additional side effects to you that would negatively impact your mental health since you are dealing with a psychiatric disorder? And so the two most common GLP-1 drugs that were found in these reviews, looking at these various studies, were liraglutide and semaglutide, and I wanted to see how it impacted these individuals. What we saw is that there was no worsening, no negative side effects towards individuals dealing with psychiatric disorders like schizophrenia, depression, bipolar, or manic episodes. And so that was really good, that it did not worsen their mental state. In fact, what we saw is that either they had no change in their mental state, so it kind of stayed at baseline, or in fact, it improved over time with the use of these GLP-1 drugs. And this we can understand kind of just anecdotally, right? As people are starting to lose weight, feel better, maybe even become more active on this medication, we know that's automatically going to improve your mood. Your metabolism gets better, your overall just health gets better because your weight is going down, which means that your cardiovascular health is getting better. You're having all these positive benefits that are coming from the GLP-1 like drug. And so of course, this is going to have a positive impact on your mood and your overall behavior, which again is a plus side. So it's ultimately helping your mental health along with your physical health. And I'll put a chart up here that kind of showed a little bit of summary of the results. What we see is that over the course of the study, again, roughly 4 months on average, people lost about 8.5 pounds. Their BMI went down 1 point, and they lost about 3 centimeters on their waist. Now, again, that may not sound like a huge amount for a 4-month period of time on average, but again, you can extrapolate that over time. These results would improve even more. And again, no negative side effects with their overall mental health. And in fact, most people had an improvement in their mental health, in their mood, because their health was moving in a positive direction overall. So to kind of put a little bow on everything, kind of the main takeaways, we know that people dealing with mental health issues like depression, like anxiety, like schizophrenia, like bipolar disorder, that they tend to have more negative metabolic health issues, whether that is higher weight, higher BMI, general rates of obesity, worse, they have worse insulin resistance, so they're more likely to be type 2 diabetic. And so these individuals are even higher risk than the general public for dealing with poor metabolic health. And by using a GLP-1 like drug, not only does it have really no negative side effects for their mental health, if anything, it'll improve their mental health and it will improve their metabolic health because now they're eating less, having fewer calories, and so their weight, their BMI is going down, their triglycerides are improving. All their metabolic markers seem to improve gradually in a healthy and sustainable way. And so if you are someone who is taking some of these psychotropic medications, it may be a good idea if you're dealing with obesity or having some issues with your health and metabolic health in general, maybe talk to your doctor and see about if a GLP-1 like med would be advisable and something that could help you out in overall improvement of your health. So it seems like GLP-1s are getting another win again, because not only do we see that from a physical standpoint, they're very helpful and very safe, but if you're someone who's dealing with the mental health side of things, it doesn't seem to have a negative impact with your medication. If anything, it's going to improve those side effects that you're dealing with from your psychotropic med. So be sure to talk to your doctor. And if you need some help in the coaching regard, let me know. I specialize working with clients for the weight loss side of things, and I would love to help y'all out or answer any questions that you may have about how these medications could fit into your exercise and diet regimen. And that's all I got for today, everyone. Hey, if y'all enjoyed this video, please be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. I love making this content for y'all. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions about GLP-1 medications as it pertains to general weight loss, being active, diet, or if you're taking a psychotropic med, how maybe that could impact you. I would love to answer that. Be sure to hit me up in Instagram at _shift_method. I can work with you in person or virtually, so y'all can send me a message, and I would love to get started with y'all. But as always, thank you so much for tuning in. I look forward to seeing y'all in the next one. Later.